In music, one of the simplest of music textures is monophony, being a simple unaccompanied melodic line. Monophonic pieces and repertory are seen to be a prominent form of music within the early Middle Ages. Monophony is able to be traced back earlier in time, however, this time period is seen to be the most influential with this form of music. This influence which the early Middle Ages has placed on music was primarily developed through sacred vocal music such as vocal chants. This presentation will look at a comparative analysis of Hildegard's Columba Aspexit and Tori Amos's Me and a Gun. This comparative analysis is an examination of both pieces, with particular focus on their use of monophonic textures being relative to each of their cultural contexts. Columba Aspexit was composed in the medieval period by Hildegard of Bingen. This medieval period, often also recognised as the Middle Ages, began roughly 476 AD following a great loss of power throughout Europe by the Roman Empire. This era spanned across an approximate of 1,000 years, ending between 1,400 and 1,450. Hildegard is recognised primarily as a church leader, but also as a theologian, composer, visionary, and writer. This composer wrote music predominantly for religious purposes within her covenant, being music for offices, masses, and general special services. The piece of focus, Columba Aspexit, was formed for a special church service, more specifically a mass honouring Saint Maximus. This piece is regarded as a plain chant, a form of early Christian music, which is expressed through monophony, a simple melody line, and typically lacking of any accompaniment. Plain chant was also often approached in such a state. Ideally, singers were to follow their activity to absorb the whole spirit and the body, inducing a state of meditative calm, and so intensifying the quality of devotional life. Distractions such as the intrusion of instrumental decorations or of extrovert vocal practices were therefore to be avoided. Plain chants were typically the only type of Christian churches accepted, as it was believed to be the only form of music which should make a listener open-minded to spiritual thoughts and reflections. Within the focused work of Hildegard, there were techniques used to highlight and emphasize the descriptive imagery of the poetic text of the piece. These techniques were inclusive of the melody, featuring syllabic, pneumatic, and melismatic passages. A study on this piece further explains these terms. These are used to indicate that instead of each syllable of the text being sung to a single note, some syllables call for several notes, or many notes per syllable. This technique, alongside a soaring melodic line that floats up and down, mirroring the expressive text that phrases seem to call for slight pauses, essentially highlights the descriptive imagery of this piece. The use of monophonic textures in a piece as such enables individuals to engage with the song with easier interpretation and ease in following along verbally. The monophonic factor in itself, without even considering the additional techniques, really allows for poetic and musical aspects to stand out. This is inevitably the reason as to why it allows for a meditative sense, being extremely pure. Shown is an extract of the discussed piece, with inclusion of both the original translation and English translation for purposes of analysis. The poetic nature of Columba Aspexit, as mentioned within the analysis, is not only clear within this excerpt, but the entirety of the piece. This extract additionally highlights why there is use of techniques as discussed previously, with imagery being an explicit key factor of this poetic writing. The piece Me and a Gun by Tori Amos was released in 1991, being relevant within the contemporary era. This song was the lead single from her debut album Little Earthquakes, respectively holding importance among her other works. This importance is held through the deep and progressive nature of this piece, essentially sharing one's past trauma and raising awareness in doing so. This haunting ballad by Tori is expressing in a quite a raw manner, emotionally, as she is sharing insight into the emotional state of mind of a recently violated date rape victim. Amos stated within an Australian TV interview, "And when I started writing it, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I mean, I was almost in a trance writing that song. I was back there in that experience, and yet another part of me was guiding it on." It is explicit that this song carries intense emotion, reflection, and power. The lyrical content of this piece provides a factor in presenting the message of this piece. However, it is the expression which shares most depth and insight into the emotion of the artist. Upon listening, it is clear that the severity of the piece through the tonal aspects of this song. Alongside the tone, the voice sounds alarmingly alone. The voice is unaccompanied by any instruments. The piece consists of one female voice throughout, expressed in an extremely more raw manner. The deliberate choice to not utilize instrumentation is an immensely powerful decision, particularly in an extremely saturated world of music, creating differentiation and standing out amongst others. The choice of using a monophonic texture is one which is not commonly seen across contemporary pieces, yet it is very engaging and fitting for a piece with traumatic recounts. Regarding the cultural context of this piece, there is drastic importance in producing music of this kind within the contemporary era. There are countless cases of harm towards not only women, but also men, which are often shared due to fear. A piece as such enables listeners to feel as if they are not alone, or in general, enable listeners to create an insight into an alarming matter of this time period. The contemporary era is greatly progressive, and music especially is a resource which can be used widely for the intent of sharing a message, raising awareness, and making a change. Monophonic textures, as outlined, are seen to largely originate from the medieval period. The use of monophony or plain chant is often seen across other eras since the Middle Ages. As seen across each individual analysis of Hildegard of Bingen and Tori Amos's piece as well, there are individual core reasonings for the decision in using monophony. The use of this textual technique, however, essentially achieves similar results. Monophonic music, again, is simply a musical texture made up of a single unaccompanied melodic line. Across both analysed pieces, there were more commonalities than anticipated, with the only true differences being the cultural context with the consideration of the time period and situational elements. By having one unaccompanied melodic line, there is seen to be a significant emphasis on the message or meaning of each piece. As an example, the plain chants of the medieval era are as powerful as they enabled the partakers to remain thoroughly engaged, open, and meditative. Through the lack of any form of instrumentation or accompaniments, there is no form of distraction, allowing for full immersion in the piece. Similarly, the contemporary piece by Tori Amos is again lacking in any form of distraction. The audience has the ability to completely engage in the raw nature of the song due to the only performing media being the voice of the artist. It is explicit how the powerful use of monophony can be, and although it may be considered a technique of the past with such significant technical progression in contemporary music, it remains just as strong in conveying a message and engaging listeners. As briefly mentioned, the only significant contrast between the two pieces in relation to monophony is the situational elements, which is simply due to differing cultural contexts. Plain chant was largely a part of the medieval era, so it is clear that the importance of monophonic music was primarily for religious purposes. In churches today, there is often seen to be one melody line. However, there is often a form of accompaniment, even if it is expressed through simple chordal progressions. The use of monophonic music in the focused piece of the contemporary era was primarily used to being engaging, powerful, raw, and provoking. The content of this piece is drastically differing to pieces of the medieval era, as it is a topic which is often quite masked within the times of the past. The utilization of monophony in a contemporary piece is seen as a rarity, however it is possible in conveying the message it is aimed to disperse, and additionally allows the piece to stand out amongst others.